Thanks for having me. First, I got to give a hand to Championship Productions and Trip for such a great lineup of coaches. I think this is one of the best lineups I've seen since I've been here, so I'm learning a ton today and enjoying this a lot, and I bet you are too. We are going to talk about basically game management. I'm going to talk a little bit about pregame, some things you maybe want to prep before you get into the match, and then try to focus quite a bit of time on what is our role and what are we doing in the match themselves. Obviously, college coaches, we have a lot of tools, we have a lot of staff, we have a lot of technology, and I know you do not have most of those resources. So hopefully I'll keep it pretty simple, and we'll be able to use what we talk about, knowing that you probably don't have 3 or 4 people taking stats on your bench or all the time in the world to scout ahead of time. I know a lot of you are teachers and have real jobs and other full-time jobs and don't have all that time to scout and to prep. So hopefully some of the ideas I give you, you'll be able to still accomplish some of that stuff. When we are getting ready for a match, we're talking about some of the just basic pre-match scouting. And again, this is what we do for a living. We have hours to spend breaking down opponents. Most of you do not. So if you don't have a lot of time, what are you doing to prepare for the match? And sometimes it might be you only have time to prepare for the real big matches. You don't have time to prepare for all those in between. You could be at a club tournament and you have no time to scout, except for maybe the time you get to watch the team that morning before you play them. So if you don't have a lot of time, what are some things you might want to pay attention to? I would pay attention to their strong or unusual servers. Do they have a really tough server? Do they have any jump topspin server that you don't see very often? That's pretty tough. Do they have a server that likes to serve short? Anything that you can pick up, and it might be day of. You watch them that morning and now you know going into that match what to expect. The game is a lot about serve and pass, so you want to know about serving and you want to know about their passers. If you can pick that up, whether it's pre-game or in the game, you want to know who their weakest passers are. That's really important. The game at every level is a lot about serve and pass. So if you can find 1 or 2 weak passers on that side, you want to make sure you identify that. You want to know their go-to hitters, what I think a lot of us call their go-to hitters, who's getting the ball a lot. Most teams have 1, 2 go-to hitters, maybe 3 if you're real lucky. At our level and the college level, there aren't even, the teams we play, there aren't a lot of teams that have 5 great hitters. There's usually 2, maybe 3. And then there's a couple kind of role player hitters. So I would guess the teams you play against, there's probably 1 great player on the other side, 1 great hitter, maybe 2. Who are they? Make sure you know that. And then what are their tendencies? So that means, where do they like to hit the ball? Are they a line hitter? Are they a cross-court hitter? Do they tip the ball a lot? Are they running the same play over and over? Do they only hit a high outside ball? Or do they move around the court a little bit? Do they attack out of the back row? But you need to know that going into that match. We have a hitter shot chart we take. We can do this on our computer, but it's very easy to do manually. And you simply take a volleyball court, and anytime the hitter hits a ball, you draw a line to where that ball ends up. And over time, you can see trends. And I think finding trends are important. It's not just a few plays or 1 set. The more information you have, probably the more accurate and more prepared you're going to be to defend them. So I look at this shot chart. And this was an example. I kind of redrew it to clean it up, but this is just a very simple example of a team we played this year. And we knew that number 7, she's up there at the top, one of their outsides, got the ball a lot. When they tip, we draw kind of a squiggly line. When it's a hard-driven attack, we draw a straight line. And you can see on her back row attack, that's the one with the dotted line there, back row attack, what is she doing a lot of? Tipping, right? A lot of her back row attack. So then I can tell my team before the match, hey, when she gets out of the back row, ready for tip. It could be something as simple as that. It could be right back, go get her tip when she gets set out of the back row. But if I know that ahead of time, maybe I can save myself a little bit of that when I get into a match, be a little bit more prepared. The middle, number 16, what does she do a lot of? She tips a lot. I'm telling my team, be ready for tip. When she gets set, we got to come in and be ready to pursue that tip. Maybe I don't block her as much. Maybe I only put one blocker on her instead of worrying about two blockers, because I'm not so worried about the hard-driven ball. I'm worried more about the tip. Number 6 down at the bottom, the other left side, outside, where does she tend to hit the ball? Cross court. Not seeing much line from her. And again, if I have a lot of information, I'll probably know her a little bit better. This is just one match. There could be another match she hit a ton of line. So if I'm tracking her a lot, I'll be able to pick up those trends. I would also say, looking at her, does she tend to hit the ball deeper cross court or sharp cross court? I would say probably deeper cross court, right? So I might tell my left back, for us it's our libero, I might tell my libero, don't worry so much about hitting sharp. Don't stay, closer to the 10-foot line. I want you to go a little deeper into the court, because that's where she's more likely to hit the ball. And she might get you a couple times. Maybe she'll hit 1 or 2 sharp. But over time, what gives us the best chance to dig her or slow her down? We would put our libero a little bit deeper in the court. So again, you might be doing this pregame. If you have a big match coming up, maybe take a little time to do this. Or you could have someone doing this in the match. A kid that's, I don't know what Keegan called him, but maybe a parent sitting at the end not doing much of anything, or a player, even a player that's just out for 3 rotations and then goes back in. She can be tracking these hitters, helping her to pay attention, kind of keeping track of that information, and then she goes back in the match. But you can have other people help you do this and keep track. I like to look for setter tendencies. They can be as simple as, when she runs forward, does she like to make the easy set or the hard set? When she runs forward, is she setting the 4-ball, or does she like to run forward and set the opposite way, set the hard set or set back? Does she like to dump? Got to know that. I like to know who they like to set. Who do they trust? When it's crunch time, she's probably going to set the person she trusts the most. So who does she like? Who does she tend to trust? I like to know if they're risk takers or not. What that means is, when the score's tight, maybe end game, is she going to take a chance and fire that ball to the middle, or is she a safe setter and she's just going to set probably a high ball that's less risky? When it gets towards the end of the game, is she going to dump the ball? Is she going to try to take over and dump a ball? Or she's not going to take that kind of risk. She's just going to set it no matter what. When does she set middle? Is it only on that perfect pass? Ball's kind of slow coming up at her. She has a little time. Or will she fire that in transition when she's scrambling? If she only sets middle off that easy, perfect pass, that's something I can tell my middles. Hey, be ready. If we give them a free ball, be ready to block their middle, because that's about the only time she'll set their middle. So just kind of knowing her personality or her, maybe not personality, but her tendencies, and if she's a risk taker or not. I like to know what teams are doing at the end of the game. Once the score gets, 20-20, do you see any patterns with what the other team does? Usually it means they have 1 or 2 hitters they really like to go to. I think most teams tend to be a little bit more balanced early, but at end game, you're probably going to see them setting their go-to hitters, or the people they really have the most faith in. So knowing the plan, knowing what's going to happen after point 20 is pretty important. I like to know strong and weak blockers. That's pretty obvious. Who's big and tall and blocking a lot of balls over there. Who's smaller, maybe not so good. I like to know where their blockers start. The top picture is versus Baylor. Baylor really likes to pinch. We call that pinch blocking, where they just really pinch those wing blockers in. And so If we know that's their blocking scheme, I might start the match saying, well, we know they're really pinched. Let's set the ball a little bit more on the pins to start and see if we can get them just stressed having to go long distances. If I play a team, this is Kansas down here, that starts more spread, and you can see the difference, right? Here's their right side blocker, and here's her. Here's their left side. Now she's much closer, right to the middle of the court. Then we might start off with a different offense against them. We might say, oh, let's run some quicks right in here. That's a little gap that's open. And let's start the match exploiting it that way. Same thing right in here. We might run some more gaps rather than starting the match so much setting towards the pin. So just things you can pick up pretty simply, whether pregame or during the match. Good feedback to know. Good stuff to know. Commit blockers. I don't know how much committing you guys do or have seen. Have anyone played against teams or does commit blocking themselves? Is there much of that? A little bit. You may see a team that commit blocks, and what that means is they're going to go leave early, so you're going to pass the ball, and their blockers are going to go find your best hitter, and they're going to go try to do everything they can to stop her. They're going to put 2 blockers on her, maybe 3, but they're going to do everything they can to slow her down. I'm going to show you what that means if you've not seen a lot of commit blocking. If I can get this to play here. Anybody know what gym this is? Yeah, pretty tough place to play, you and I. All right, here's a commit block situation. So we're on the other side. We have a middle and outside front row. So our setter's front row. Do you see you and I leaving early? They are all over our middle, which is smart because she was scoring a lot of points for us. So they chased her and left our outside with only 1 blocker. You're going to see the same thing again. They're all over our middle. They're leaving early. They're leaving before she even sets the ball. And then we set somebody else and she didn't have a block up there. So we knew going into this match that they were going to commit block on us a little bit, which is smart because at the time we were really relying on our middle to get a lot of points for us. So it was just good to know as I entered that match, as our setter entered that match, what the plan was going to be. Now we were fortunate we could set somebody else and they could still get a kill. You might not be so fortunate. You might set someone else and they still won't get that kill even if they only have 1 blocker. And in that case, you might as well just set your big gun and live with that. But I like to go into matches kind of knowing what that block is doing on the other side. What's their plan? Where do they start and do they commit? I like to know opponent defense. I feel like a lot of us run kind of the same defense. We all kind of look the same. I mean, most of us are either in more of a perimeter defense or a rotation defense. So I don't know, we don't spend too much time on opponent defense, but we do like to make sure our players know where to put the ball when they're in trouble. So if they can't get a swing, a good swing, in fact, maybe they even have to throw the ball over the net, where do they want to take it? Some teams, it's a great idea to take it at the setter. Find the setter, tip the ball at her, even if it's not a kill. We're going to force the setter to play the ball. Now they're out of system. We have the advantage. Sometimes it's just the middle of the floor. Maybe they're not very good pursuing balls. Maybe their, let's say, left front blocker isn't very good coming off and playing defense. Maybe we just want to throw that ball in the middle of the floor. But I like to make sure my team knows, going into a match, where we want to put the ball when we're in trouble. And then I like to think, what are they going to try to do against us and how are we going to respond? Probably a few times a season, I like to watch a match and try to watch us the way I think the opponent watches us. Does that make sense? You know, you kind of try to watch with almost fresh eyes, like, all right, if I'm an opposing coach and I'm watching us and I'm trying to beat us, what would I do? And that's what the teams are going to do when you play them. You know, you need to know, are they going to, oh man, if I was playing us right now, I'd service short. If I was playing us next match, I wouldn't worry about my outside and I'd just be all over the middle. You know, if I was playing us, I would serve my best outside every single ball and wear her down. So take time every so often to think about how opponents are going to try to beat you and get ready for it. You know, you got to start practicing that, simulate some things in practice. Know how you're going to respond. You know, if someone thinks, if another team thinks, man, I'm going to serve their best hitter every ball I can and wear her down, what are you going to do about that? Are you okay with her taking all those? Or do you want to come up with some response so that maybe she shifts out of the serve receive and give her a little break and let some other people pass the ball? But what are teams going to try to do to you, and what's your response going to be? Hopefully that didn't seem like a lot. I do think a lot of that can be done relatively quickly. When we get into more advanced stuff, you know, if you've got a real big match coming up, you're getting into the playoffs, and you have a little more time to spend, you need to start looking at your opponent's side out. Your opponent's side out rotation. I'm going to show you, well, maybe I'm not going to show you. Here's an example of something we do. It's a little hard to read. I did put a blank example for you in the packet if you want to take a look. But we have all 6 rotations. So this is rotation 1, 2, and 3. This is our opponent. We write down where everybody stands on the court, right? You know where each passer is. You know where each hitter is. And then we just write down what's their pattern, where they hit, and the result. If you do this enough, over time you're going to see patterns. You're going to see who they tend to set in each rotation. You might see what they do at the end of the game in each rotation. We like to write little notes, just some observations we're making to help us prepare. I think the game, I like to think of the game as six mini games. Each rotation is kind of its own little game. And each rotation can be pretty different from the next. So preparing for a big match, you might want to start looking at your opponent more in depth, looking at their side out patterns. Who do they tend to set? How do you want to serve into each of those rotations? And really starting to break them down. So again, in that side out chart, you're tracking passers, right? We talked about finding their weak passers. So let's find those. And then you're looking at the plays they run and who do they tend to set. You could start looking at what they do in transition, especially when the setter digs the first ball. A lot of teams are bad when the setter digs the first ball. You know, there's not a whole lot of teams that look real smooth, that get kills when their setter digs the first ball and someone else has to set. So take a look at how they look. You know, how does that team handle that? Is it a good idea to just throw the ball at the setter sometimes and take your chances that you'll defend that and still be able to convert and score a point? So taking a look at that. What rotation do they tend to start in? And we'll talk a little bit more about rotations here in a second. Keegan touched on that. Hopefully that made sense to you. I like to know what rotation the opponent coach is going to start in. Do they like to stay or do they change? We have some coaches in our game that stay in the same rotation no matter what. They start in the same rotation no matter what. Whatever, that works for them, that's fine. Some coaches love to change. If they lose the first set, they're going to change to a different rotation the next set. I think that's good to know. It's also good to know what rotation they like to start in Game 5. Because Game 5 is so different. It's shorter. You have to get up to a good start. You're not so worried about subs. So you got to know if they do anything different when they get into Game 5. And then, if you're a matchup person, if you like to think about matchups, you want to know, I like to go into each match knowing, okay, if I'm talking about matchups, what might make sense? What am I looking for? What's going to be to our advantage? So one of the most simple matchups is our best hitters versus their weakest blockers, right? If you have a key hitter and you know she's got to get a lot of kills for you, you would love for her to be hitting against their weakest blockers, right? I'm going to show you an example of that. Jess Shaban, hopefully some of you have heard that name from around here. She was our number one point scorer last year. And this is a match versus K-State. So Jess Shaban's hitting on the left side, and she's hitting against the K-State setter, who's not very big. And you can see she's just kind of going over her, getting a lot of kills over this setter. So she was one of their probably at least smaller, if not weaker blockers. And I thought that was really to our advantage. Our best hitter was against probably their weakest blocker. Now we are playing in Ames here. Ooh, that's a little off. Now they put their bigger blocker against Jess Shaban. So you can see the block size now changes a little bit. A little bit bigger, it's going to make her job a lot tougher. She doesn't get kind of those free swings she was getting against the setter. So that's a matchup. That's what matchups mean. And that's one of the basic ones. Can you get your key hitter, your best hitter, against their weaker blockers? I don't worry too much about the kid that's not getting many kills. You know, it doesn't really matter if she's hitting against a good blocker or a weak blocker. It's not really going to be that much to our advantage. But if I have a player I know it's going to get a ton of sets, we need her to get a ton of kills, I'm hoping to get her against the weaker blockers. And in the reverse, too. If they have a great hitter, you're playing someone with a great hitter, can you put your best blockers against them? And that's why matchups can be really important, because it can affect the hitter on the other side. It can affect the kind of night that they have. And then another one I think is good to look at, and I like to look at, is your strong side-out rotations versus a tough server on the other side. I'm going to show you what I mean here. This is our one of the last matches of the year. We played UNLV. And take a look at this server. This is the UNLV server. She led the nation in aces per set. It was wicked. She had 8 aces against us that night in 4 sets. That's how we felt too. We just laughed at some of them, like, there's nothing you can do. Good try. In fact, if you didn't know, we had people stepping away from the ball, like, maybe next one, not that one. In fact, it was funny because we prepped for that, like we tried to prep for that, and the very first time she went back and served, it was like, yeah, we didn't prep for that. But we didn't have anybody in the gym that could hit the ball that hard. Point being, when we went into that match, I felt like we could probably do a pretty good job on all of their hitters. So there was no hitters on the other side that really concerned me from that team. There were really no blockers that concerned me. I thought we could kind of manage all that. The one thing I was worried about was that kid, that server. And so when I went into the match thinking, what rotation do we want to be in when she's serving us? Because if she catches us where we have a weak group of passers or we have a weak group of hitters, she's going to run a lot of points. And she did at times. I can't remember exactly how it all went, but I think game 1, she just tore us apart. We rotated, did a little better. The other coach rotated. We ended up in a bad rotation again. It was a little bit cat and mouse. But again, my point is, if you're playing someone, you're coming up to a match, and man, that kid has such a great serve, such a great jump topspin server or whatever, can you match it up so that you feel confident about the rotation you're in when you're receiving her serve, right? You don't want to get stuck in that. And then the other thing I like to kind of try to figure out is, what does that opponent coach do when their team starts to struggle? because I kind of like to know, because I feel like then when I see it, I know, all right, we're on to something here. We've got them. I think there's probably two things I see a lot. I see substitutions. Some coaches are quick to sub or start, you, just lots of people going in. So if I see that, I know we kind of got them on the ropes. Or sometimes I just like to know, okay, if this kid struggles, who's coming in? I might need to know, who else to expect. And I also see coaches getting emotional on the sideline when their team's struggling. And I like to see that personally. I like to see them get really angry and start screaming at their kids and barking at them on the sidelines, because then I feel like we got them. We got them on the ropes. We wanted to get them to this point. And I'll even share that with the team. We know when they start to struggle, the coach is going to start screaming at them. And if they look over and see it, they're feeling good. They know we got them to that point. So that takes a little bit of watching and studying, but sometimes it's good to know when that opponent coach is, where that team's struggling, what do you got to be ready for? All right, so if you, again, maybe it's just for your big matches, but you want to put together, a scouting report. I put an example that we started with a long time ago when it was a lot more handwriting, just a very simple scouting report. I don't think it would take very long to fill out. It's just basically who are the key hitters and their tendencies, maybe their defense or what you want to do when you're in trouble, where do you want to throw the ball, and a few keys to the match. I mean, it can be that simple. A couple things to keep in mind. I think less is better. I know I've gotten at times in the habit of just giving our kids so much information, and they can't do much with it. We really can't change who we are, change the way we play. We can't really just become a different team based on who we play. So a lot of the stuff is going to be about us and how our team plays, how we execute, but maybe there's a couple things that will help them. So there's stuff the team needs to know, and there's stuff the coaches need to know. The team doesn't need to know all that much. Go-to hitters I think are important. End game stuff might help them a little bit. Tough servers, different kinds of servers, who are you going after, who's their weak passers, that kind of stuff. But there's a lot more other stuff that really only the coaches need to know. You don't need to share that with them or put it on a scouting report. They don't need to really understand the rotations or the matchups or where the other team starts. Even end game stuff, you can help them with that by directing them a little bit. If I know exactly where the ball's going on this serve. You can tell them that, share that with them, tell them, hey, ball's going out here, let's make sure we get 2 blockers up out there. You would love if they knew that. You would love it if they figured that out themselves and knew that, but they might, need some of that direction. You can only execute tactically what you can do technically. And what I mean by that is, don't ask your kids to go do something in a game that might make sense to do, but they haven't trained to do it. They're probably not going to be able to do it very well or do it with confidence. And my quick story for that is when I was a player myself, I remember coming back and my coach called short zone 2 or something, served a short zone, told me to serve a short zone. I never served short in practice. And I went back there, and what do you think I did? Lollipop, right into zone 6. Nothing close to a short serve. It's a terrible serve, and he got so mad at me. And at the time, I felt horrible, but looking back, I thought, well, what did he expect? I never trained it, and I certainly didn't have confidence. I remember going back there thinking, where's zone 2 again? I don't remember. You got to give them a chance to practice it under pressure, but give them some confidence so that when you get into a match, they're going to be able to execute what you want. Prepping during the week before you get to that match is really helpful. Don't throw it at them the day of and tell them, I know we've been running a lot of rotation defense, but we're going to go to, you can't change things on them the day of. They have to be doing this throughout the week, or better yet, throughout the season. And that takes a little bit of planning, a little bit of forethought, but one thing we like to do is think about who am I going to have to beat to get what I want to get? You know, who do we have to beat to win districts or regionals or conference championship or get to the state tournament or win a state championship? Who do we have to beat? And what do they do? What do we need to be ready for? And you'll probably know, right? You'll know the best teams that are going to be on your road. You know, do they have a big outside hitter you're going to have to slow down? Do they have a back row attacker? Do they have a great server? Do they have big blockers? And you can throw that in day one. You know, you can start implementing some of that stuff throughout the season and not just right before you play them. And your kids don't even have to necessarily know why you're doing it, but to know that down the road, you're going to need this. So for us, for example, in our league, Texas is huge, right? Super physical, hitting the ball really, really hard. They always have 2 huge physical left side hitters. So during the season, we have the luxury of getting guys in the gym that can jump a little higher and hit the ball a little harder. But we'll try to simulate that. You know, here's a big, huge physical left side. Now, we're not playing her this weekend. We play them in a month. But let's start kind of mixing this into practice a little bit. Hitting against big blockers. You know, if you have a team coming up or a team on your path that is big, you know, put people on a box or sometimes we put 3 blockers up against our hitters just to give them the feeling of, okay, I've got a big block in front of me. How can I score? So don't think about just who you're playing next or who you're playing this weekend, but who do you got to play to get to the finals, get to the championship, whatever you're trying to do. So just some different ideas in there. Again, unusual jump servers. You know, I think if you do that throughout season, it helps them have more confidence when it comes time to play them. Starting in different rotations. You know, a lot of times I think coaches, we automatically go out and start in rotation 1 in practice. Practice starting into different rotation just to get them a little more ready. We play teams throughout the season that have a really fast offense. And so we need to throw in days before then where we know how we're going to block it because we tweak our blocking a little bit when we see someone zip it around. Or if you're going to play a team with a nice back row attacker, start working on it early season. Keegan talked about this, so I won't go too much into it, but I do think it's really good for every coach to know what your best rotations are and what your worst rotations are. So your best rotations probably mean you have good passers in there and you probably have your best attackers in there. There's a good chance of that. And this is, again, this is going back to what rotation do I start in. You know, don't just start in rotation 1 just because. I think you should have a reason. And it could be because those are your best rotations. Maybe 1, 2, and 3 are really good for you, or 1 and 2. So be thoughtful about it. What are your best rotations for point scoring, right, when you're serving? A lot of that has to do with who's serving. That's a big part of it. So if you got some really great servers, that's probably going to be your best point scoring rotations. It might also have to do with who's blocking and hitting for you. So when you're thinking about what rotation do I want to start in, you could think about all of those things and just base it on what you do well, but you might like the thought of matchups. You might think that's going to be an important part of the game, so that might change what rotation you start in. And maybe in the 5th game you just cash it all and just start in the rotation you want to start in. That Game 5 to me is a little bit different because you have to get off to a great start. You cannot afford to get stuck in a rotation early in Game 5 or really any time, but you really want to get off to a great start. You have more substitutions. So that, if normally you would like to start in another rotation, but, you side out and you have to use 2 subs right away, maybe you don't want to do that normally. In Game 5, it's probably not going to matter because you have a lot of subs for 1 set. All right, so now we are getting to actual game time. If you have the staff, I think it's good to have 1 coach assigned to your side and then 1 coach assigned to the opponent. Okay, so mostly I think that's your side out and their side out. you could do transition and you could do more stuff, but I think that's the most important part. How are you doing inside out, and how are they doing inside out or slash your point scoring? In your side out, I like to have people tracking how we're passing. Are they hitting a certain passer? If they're hitting a certain passer over and over and over and she's struggling, we might need to make a change or make an adjustment. In that rotation, how's the attacking? And are there some adjustments you need to make? And hopefully this one will work. So this is our rotation 1. So most people in rotation 1, I call this spread, meaning we're spread out. I have my right side is over here hitting. Here's my middle, and there's my left side, okay? So my left side is actually hitting on the right side. My right side is now hitting on my left side. And some kids are really good, doesn't matter, you know, they're comfortable either spot. These two were not that comfortable hitting either spot. They got better at it. But that was always something I had to watch in our rotation 1. So we were watching for passers. You know, is anyone kind of getting worked back there? Do we need to make an adjustment? And then how was our attacking? And do we need to make an adjustment? I personally like to have at least 2 options in each rotation. And so what that means is if the other team is just running points, I like to at least give them a different look. And it may or may not help, but I think it's good to just give them a different look. So if we're struggling and this person is getting worked, I want the team to have they understand there's some option we can go to where I can pull her out of passing and give them a different look. Even if she's not getting served, sometimes just moving someone to a different part of the court instead of passing middle, now I'm maybe passing the right sideline. Even just that kind of tweak, different look can help you with your side out. So here we just stayed spread for a few plays here. So there's my right side hitting on the left. Now here's my left side. She hits on the right, and I think she hit that ball out. And then we tried a back row attack. All right, and then we put our left side, and I don't know if you guys caught that. We started our left side, I call that pinched or stacked over, and now I ran her out and had her hit where she's more comfortable. But we had a few different options in that rotation because we tended to struggle in it. So I wanted to make sure we had 1 or 2 looks, different looks. And it would be great if the team did that. If the team was like, hey, why don't you go side out over there and we'll do this. But there aren't that many kids that understand the game at that level and would make that adjustment. So I think it's totally fine if a coach says, hey, let's make this, give them a different look. It's probably going to have to come from the coach a lot of the time. And then you want to be tracking your opponent side out, or basically how you're point scoring, right, off your serve. So you got to, are you hitting your service zones? Someone needs to be paying attention to that. If you're calling zones, are you hitting those zones and hitting their weak passers? If you're not disrupting their passers, if they're still passing pretty well, you have to start thinking about disrupting the attacker on the other side. And I have a couple examples of that. This first one is when other teams were doing it to us, and they were disrupting, making it more difficult for this hitter to get a good attack. So this one, you guys heard me talk about Jess Shaven. She got the most sets on the team by far. She's passing in the left back spot, but she's front row. A lot of teams served Jess Shaven a ton because she had to pass and hit, pass and hit, pass and hit all the time. So they're trying to keep her busy, pushing her deep, made it more difficult for her to get a good swing. I think this next one is really good. They pushed her deep and into the court. Great serve, and now she doesn't get a very good swing out of that. They're disrupting her approach, keeping her busy. Here she tries to hit a pipe, So she's trying to hit a back row attack. A lot of teams would serve her short. If you watch her here, she passes a ball short. Now she's got to back up and try to hit the pipe. That's smart serving. They're trying to keep her busy. They're disrupting her attack. Now on the flip side, we knew teams were going to do that. So we wanted to make sure we were prepping for that. You know, Jess, can you take the short ball and still get a good approach? Or, hey, you're out of this. Someone else is going to go take that short ball, that short serve, so that Jess Shaven could go get her approach for the pipe. Sorry, let's go back here. Disrupting attackers' approach, and I think this is really true for us when we had a server who wasn't a very tough server, and I'm talking about Jess Shaman again. Unbelievable player, not a great server in terms of she couldn't contact a ball cleanly, consistently, and we spent a lot of time on it. 4 years of it, and it just great arm, great competitor, never had a great serve deep. So she serves short a ton. And it was amazing because teams knew it was coming. It's no secret. If you scouted us at all, you knew she was probably going to serve short at some point during the match. But it wasn't for her to get an ace. You know, we weren't looking for that. We were looking for her to disrupt the attacker's approach. And a lot of times it was the middle attacker. So here's just 2 clips of her serving short. They knew it was coming and still passed it off the net. So that was our solution for a kid that didn't have a great serve, but we had to figure out some way to score points in her rotation. We didn't want her to just serve a lollipop. So she got really good at a short serve. And she made middles have to pass a lot of balls and could still cause a lot of problems. And her point scoring in her rotation was actually pretty good, considering she served short so much of the time. Also during the match, you know, obviously we're trying to figure out the opponent hot hitters. Maybe you knew who their go-to was, and maybe that is their go-to in the match, or maybe someone is going off and you just never expected that player to go off. But we're paying attention to that, who's hot that night, and how are we going to slow them down. And Kevin mentioned this, just talking about adjustments in your block and defense. You know, his libero has a really good feel for maybe any adjustments you want to make. You know, if we're having a hard time slowing down a hitter, you know, you've got options. How's your serving? You know, are you disrupting their attack or making it difficult for them? How is your block? Are you slowing them down with how you line up? This is a player at Kansas who was really hitting well, and we said she's getting kills down the line a lot. We felt like we could dig her ball cross court, but we couldn't stop her down the line. So we adjusted our block to block line. And at Iowa State, when we say block line, what we mean is we're going to take we call it our inside hand, and put it on the ball. So we're kind of protecting line. It doesn't mean go stand by the antenna, because the ball will vary, right? If I stand by the antenna and the set's way in here, I'm not going to be even close to the ball. So we talk about when we say, hey, let's block line, we put our inside hand on the ball. When we're giving more line, we might put our nose or our outside hand on the ball. And that's just easy words we use. And so against this kid, we said, put your inside hand on the ball. Block her line, and we'll dig her cross court. So that she's hitting on this side here. And we put our inside hand on the ball, block the line, and we were able to touch her there. And then here she hits cross court. And that's okay, we dug it, so we're fine with that. And this last one is not executing the skill, which happens with us too. That last one, we were still supposed to be blocking line, but we didn't. We gave up quite a bit of line, and then she got the kill. So it's not like we're saying she'll never hit the ball cross court, but what we're saying is over the stretch of the match, over time, we feel like she'll struggle if we block the line and dig her cross. So we're looking, during the game, we're looking for hot hitters and how are we going to slow them down. And then do we need to adjust our backcourt defense? Do we need to commit block? If you play a team with one or two, but a couple of great hitters on the other side, you might want to think about commit blocking. That can be a really effective way to slow a hitter down. But it has to be trained. You cannot just go into a match and say, commit block, I want you to go early and block this kid, because I've tried it and they don't understand it. Because they don't understand the timing. When do I leave? If I'm a middle, when you say commit to the left side blocker, do I leave right after the serve and go stand out here? Do I leave after the setter sets, but I know I'm going? What if there's an overpass? What if I'm supposed to be commit blocking and I've left and now there's a ball that's tight to the net in an overpass? That has to be trained. So they get the timing of it, but once you do it a little bit, they get it. Okay, this is what commit blocking means. Maybe you stay, see the pass, and then you can go. And then in game time, we're talking about matchups. I look at matchups, at least some, to decide, are we better off, whether it's a tough server, whether it's we have one hitter that's terrible and another one that's great that night. Do I want to start her in the front row? How's the big hitter on the other side? Do I need to change a matchup so I have a bigger block against her? But those are all the things I'm paying attention to. Timeouts. I think we all probably have a pretty good feel for timeouts. We're trying to stop momentum. I think the thing we got to remember, especially if you're a beginning coach, not too early, not too late. And that's just the art of it and knowing your team. I like thinking, can we afford to lose this next point? If we lose this next point and it's going to be almost out of reach, let's call a timeout. But again, that might be knowing your team a little bit. It's probably not worth calling a timeout at 13:24, you're down. Probably too late, right? Probably too, and I've seen it. I've seen teams not call timeout till it's 1 or 2 points within the set. So can you afford to lose that next point? I think Kevin maybe touched on this a little bit. We're giving them minimal feedback. You don't want them, they really can't think about or change too much within a match. You give them 1 or 2 things and that's probably enough. I like assigning, we have coaches that are looking at the offense and the defense. We also have positional coaches. Again, you might not have all of that, but if you have, you might be able to talk about offense, and maybe you have an assistant that can talk about defense. Some coaches divide it up that way as well. Depending on who called the timeout, that's the coach that talks to the team. I'm one, they come in and I start talking, where it's not real specific. Sometimes if I'm not sure what I want to say, I might confer with the coaches a little bit. We always try to talk to our setters in a timeout. I think they need a little extra feedback. Again, we can't execute what we don't train, so don't bring them in a timeout and come up with some great idea that you've never practiced. That's going to be a little tough. I think it's cool when players contribute. If they have an idea, or ask them. What I don't like are people just staring at you like deer in headlights, because they're panicking at that point. They're scared. So I encourage them to talk to each other, say something, especially your leaders. Even if you got to fake it a little bit, you gotta talk to your teammates in timeout and give them some encouragement. Again, a little setter feedback. We've talked about with these other guys just being consistent with who you are, strategic versus emotional, which means I don't know how often when you bring them in and just getting crazy excited or chewing someone out, I don't know how effective that is. I prefer, and this, it's just me, but I prefer just giving them some strategic thoughts, some observations. I think it's hard to change technique within a match. So what that means is, you got a hitter that seems to always hit low. She always drops her elbow and she hits low all the time. If you've been working on it for a month or two, it's probably not going to just click, in the middle of a match. You know, and it's not that you can't remind them or encourage them to do those things, but, you know, I always feel like matches are just a reflection of what we've been doing. You know, that you're not going to see probably too much new in a match that you didn't see in practice. So to expect some kid to totally all of a sudden click on a technique or change something isn't going to happen very often. So in our timeouts, they're not too emotional unless we're playing really bad or really lack of effort. You know, if you ever watch our team and you watch my husband Joe coach on the sideline, that's the emotional guy. When we need it, that's what he's going to give him. But a lot of it's just the game, you know, and strategy. And you've got to manage substitutions, of course. I personally, I'm very slow to make subs. Why is that? I hate it. I don't want a player always looking, you know, always looking like, what? I just made a mistake. Am I going to get pulled? I don't want them looking over their shoulder wondering, is that the mistake that's going to get me pulled? I really want my players to have the freedom to play and make mistakes and know that the game is not about not making those errors. You know, the game is of mistakes and we have to give them the freedom to do that. So I personally am slow to make changes because I don't want them ever being afraid to play. But at some point, you know, players just playing horribly, yeah, I mean, we can't keep them in there the whole time. At some point, we're going to need to make a change. At the beginning of Shaban's career, Jess Shaban, the one I was showing you earlier, she was doing so much for us. You know, she's passing every rotation, playing out of the back row, attacking out of the back row. She's getting a lot of sets. We would pull her a little bit just to give her a breather. You know, it's a lot. She's doing a lot for us. Hey, sit on the bench for just get a drink. Couple breaths here, and then let's send you back out. But that can be a good way to use a sub. Do you need her in the lineup to win the game? You know, if you have a key hitter and you know she's got to be, you know, have a pretty good night to win this match, you probably don't pull her, and it might not matter how bad she's doing. Again, Jess Shaban for us, if she was hitting negative first set, she was staying in because we weren't going to win unless she got going. And she wasn't going to get going on the bench. So if you've got a hitter, that's key, and you know you need her, and you don't think your chances are very good of winning without her, you know, maybe your third left side is barely getting the ball over the net. You're not going to win with that kid in the match, you let her go. And you have faith and encouragement and hope that she'll work her way out of it. And a lot of times they do. You know, they get into the second set, they start to relax, maybe get in a better rhythm, maybe they figure out the block and the defense a little better, and then they start working their way back in. So I wouldn't quit on them too early. I think poor body language, poor attitude, that gets you yanked quicker. So if your player is taking good swings, she's hitting high, but she's just getting blocked, maybe she's making errors, but she's making what we call good errors. You know, she just missed the fingers, but you know, it was a good try. You know, that's okay. She's still fighting. She's got a good attitude. She's positive, making eye contact. Great. You keep going. You're going to work your way out of that. She's hanging her head, no eye contact. There's a lot of drama. Everyone in the gym knows she's struggling. You might pull that kid quicker, in fact, pretty quick, because that's different, right? That's much different than a kid that's struggling but still staying aggressive. You tipping the ball out of bounds, hitting the ball in the bottom of the net, bad errors. Those people might need to come out sooner rather than players that are just, they're making errors, but they're the right kind of errors. And then always a follow-up conversation. Amber mentioned this. I totally agree. I've seen kids where it is so obvious why they got pulled. I mean, you're thinking, this is the worst match you've ever played. You know, this is just horrible. Obviously, I have to pull you. And then what do you know, that night or the next day they're in your office saying, you know, why did you pull me? I was just getting going after that, 10th error, that 11th swing was going to be a kill. I just knew it. So don't ever assume that they understand why they got pulled. I think it can save you some hassle and some heartache later. Post-game, one thing we've started the last few years is we like to, right after the game, come together as a coaching staff and we say, what'd you see? What'd you like? I love that because it's fresh. You know, you just remembered, okay, this was our scouting report. This worked, this didn't work. The next time we played them, you know, the next time we play them, we need to delay on our block more. You know, we were too early because that kid has a big jump and we were too early. Or the next time we play them, I don't know, the slide worked really well or something like that. But fresh on your brain, you've got all these great people around you, you know, give you some good ideas. Take some notes, slip it in the folder, and then that next time you play them, you got it right there. You have a chance to give feedback to your team. Do you like a quick few minutes, or are you the coach that likes to take them in the back of the locker room and just talk to them for an hour and just, you know, ream them for all the things they did wrong? It's tempting to do that, but everybody hates that. You know, I personally feel like just talk to them for a few minutes and then just give it some time. You know, give yourself a little time to cool down, maybe them to cool down, especially I'm talking the losses, right? Those are the times we want to talk to the team. I like watching film before I really have anything real critical to say, because film is more honest. You know, you might think you know what you saw, but sometimes watching the film gives you a little better perspective. I think you have to you know, judge yourself. Was your team well prepared? I always feel like there's probably 1 or 2 matches a year where I just did a bad job preparing the team. You know, it's just like, man, they ran stuff I did not expect, or, you know, that UNLV jump server I showed earlier, I did a bad job preparing our team for her. We were not ready for that. And I think it's really good if you can tell the team that, like, hey guys, that was on me. You guys were not ready. I did not do a good job with the scouting report or preparing you. You know, I'm going to take responsibility for that. But I'm telling you, I always think there's probably 1 or 2 at least matches per year where I don't feel like I did the job I needed to do to get us ready, and I think it's important to let your players know that too. Real quick, just these are some of the post-game stats, but a lot of it's the percentages. What's your point scoring percentage? What's your side-out percentage? And why? You know, it's great to know that you're siding out at, well, it's not great, but you know, if you're siding out at 50% in a rotation, you got to figure out why, right? Is it your passing? Is it your setters making bad choices? Is it your attackers? But you can't just know that you're doing it. You have to know why you're doing it so you can fix the problem. So these are different ways I like to look at the game, and I think the most important things. And Keegan also mentioned, you know, like blocks per set, that's okay. And, you know, it's somewhat telling, but there's so many other things that happen when you're blocking. You know, are you getting a good touch? If you get lots of good touches, but maybe not a lot of stuff blocks, you're still a really good blocker. You know, it's not really so much, blocking isn't so much about stuff blocks, it's about good touches and funneling the ball to the right spot. So these are, I think, pretty basic. Some you've got to do a little work to get to, but I think they're pretty helpful. And that is all I got. Any questions? If I can send you any blank templates, questions, or anything, there's my email. Love to interact with you guys, and hopefully I'll see you all later tonight and tomorrow as well. Hold on one sec. Yes, Marty.
Do you say anything to your players on the bus back home?
Do I say anything to my players on the bus back home? Not usually. It could be a good use of time. Some of you, I mean, we have more time, I think, than a lot of you guys do. So I think you could use that time. But again, I don't think just going on and on, I think they zone out. Use your time well. I think it could be a good opportunity though. Yep. All right, thank you.